Welcome back to your remote learning experience. This lesson is going to be for Tuesday, March 31st, okay? So this is where we left off yesterday. Yesterday we were talking about sexual reproduction and meiosis, okay? So kind of just a recap from yesterday, we talked about what sexual reproduction is and how meiosis is a process that makes sperm and egg cells, and those sperm and egg cells can combine their genetic information to form a baby or a zygote, okay? Then we talked about the differences between haploid cells and diploid cells. So diploid cells are considered body cells that have those two sets of chromosomes, so 46 chromosomes total. Then those haploid cells are what we're kind of interested in here with meiosis because they have half of the amount of genetic information. They have 23 chromosomes instead of 46, okay? So now we're going to get into the phases of meiosis a little bit. I'm going to do some drawing on the whiteboard and we'll actually talk about the different phases of meiosis. But I did want to just give a brief overview of the phases first, and then we'll get more in depth into what actually happens, okay? So we'll start here with number 1. So meiosis involves two divisions of the nucleus and also the cytoplasm, okay? Remember, the cytoplasm is kind of like the jelly-like material that's just chilling on the inside of the cell. So I'm going to write cytoplasm. Right here, all right? So meiosis is actually split into two different parts, okay? There's meiosis 1 right here, and then meiosis 2 right here. And the result of meiosis 1 and meiosis 2 is 4 cells that are haploid, meaning they have half the number of chromosomes, and that number happens to be 23. Okay? So we have to remember that before we even can go into meiosis, we have this phase called interphase. Whoops. Sec. Whoops. Okay? And interphase is where we're going to make copies of the DNA. All right, so we might start with some DNA right here. It kind of just looks like spaghetti. And after interphase, we have another copy of that DNA, okay? And those copies are going to be the same with each other, okay? Mostly. All right, so then we get into meiosis 1, which is the very first part of meiosis. And so in this phase of meiosis, each pair of homologous chromosomes separates. Okay, so if you guys remember from yesterday, homologous chromosomes are those chromosomes that are very similar to one another. So remember, you have two copies of your chromosomes. So here's one copy, here's another copy, all right? These copies, these large copies, would be considered homologous because we have two large chromosomes and then the two small ones would be homologous. It just means that they're very similar to one another. Similar, but not identical. That's important to note, but we will get there eventually. All right? So after meiosis 1, where those homologous chromosomes separate, two cells form and go through a second division of the nucleus. And cytoplasm called meiosis 2. Okay? And during meiosis 2, it's when the actual sister chromatids whoops. This thing can be such a pain sometimes. Separate to produce 4 cells that have half the number of chromosomes, aka 23. Okay, so this seems pretty vague right now, so I'm actually going to start talking about the different phases of meiosis. So what I'm going to do is go online, right? This was part of my whiteboard that I started. All right, so I'm going to get to this right here to start, all right? So we are going to talk about the different phases of meiosis, okay? So I gave you guys a graphic organizer for this. So this is for you to kind of fill out to help kind of get yourself organized with the phases of meiosis. Actually, scratch that. I just want you to listen to this, okay? And then I'll have you do an activity with the phases of meiosis tomorrow, okay? So all you have to do is listen. But if you would like to take notes, you can absolutely do that, and you can watch this video as many times as you need, okay? So remember, meiosis produces those sperm and egg cells, okay? And those are the reproductive cells. But before we can even get into meiosis, we have to go through that phase called interphase, which is the exact same thing with mitosis, all right? We need interphase because that's when we make a copy of the DNA, right? And we need copies of the DNA because that makes sure that the cells that are formed from meiosis have the correct amount of DNA, okay? You don't want a cell with no DNA because then it won't be able to do anything. It doesn't know what to do. But you also don't want to have a cell with too much DNA, okay? Because sometimes that can lead to some kind of physical problems potentially, okay? So before interphase, all right, let's say we have some DNA right here, and it's just kind of organized like a ball of yarn, all right, or a messy ball of yarn rather. And after interphase, I made a copy of this DNA, all right? So I have my red right here, and then I have my blue right here. And these are copies of the DNA that I want, all right? So now that we've copied our DNA, we can actually get into the different phases in meiosis, okay? As I mentioned earlier, there's two different phases in meiosis. Hang on a sec while this loads. We have meiosis 1 and meiosis 2, okay? And each of these phases follow the same phases as mitosis, which is PMAT. And PMAT stands for prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and then telophase, okay? So it's pretty much just like mitosis times 2, all right? And so we have two different names for the two different parts of meiosis. We have meiosis 1 because it's the first part of meiosis, and then meiosis 2. And each of these phases of meiosis do PMAT. So they each do prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase, and they also do cytokinesis. Okay, and that's when the cell actually splits, right? So today I'm just going to be talking about meiosis 1, all right? And then tomorrow we'll get into meiosis 2, okay? But I've kind of drawn a very simplistic visual of what happens during, hang on a sec. Meiosis 1. Or prophase 1, okay? So there's three very important things that happen during, let me see if I can move this around. Oh no, I just moved the whiteboard. All right, never mind. Three very important things that happen during prophase 1. The first thing that happens in prophase 1 is very similar to mitosis in that the nucleus will just start to kind of break down. Okay, so the nucleus is that protective barrier that kind of makes sure the DNA is nice and protected. But as you can see in this visual right here, it starts to break down like that. All right, so we'll have normal nucleus so that we can have access to that DNA. All right. Another thing that happens is that this DNA, instead of becoming like that hair that you find at the bottom of your shower drain, it becomes more organized into what we call chromosomes. Okay? And these chromosomes kind of look like this. They look like two X's. I have a red one and I have a blue one. Okay? So, what happens eventually is that your cells start to form these microtubules, okay? And these microtubules are kind of like pieces of rope. Eventually, they're going to lasso themselves onto the chromosomes and be able to pull them in one direction or another. And then there's also those centrioles, okay? And the centrioles are what kind of make those microtubules, okay? So it's important to note that this is one phase, or this is one important thing that happens during prophase 1. This is the second. Also important to remember that during prophase 1 and meiosis 1, these cells start with 46 chromosomes. So even though I have 2 drawn, there's actually 46 of these suckers in here, all right? But I've only drawn 2 for now, okay? Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to draw 4 because that'll make things easier in the long run. So I'm going to draw a big red one, big blue one, small red one, small blue one. So I actually have 4 right now, but normally I would have 46. I just can't draw 46 right now. All right, so one very important thing that happens during prophase 1 is this process called crossing over. So crossing over is a process where chromosomes get to exchange genetic information, okay? So here I've drawn my 2 big chromosomes, and I'm also going to draw my 2 little chromosomes, all right? And so what happens during crossing over that's really unique about meiosis is that the chromosomes, they kind of switch arms with each other, all right? So eventually you have a big red chromosome with a blue arm and then a big blue chromosome with a red arm. And the same thing is going to happen with these little guys down here. Okay, it's going to have a section of blue on it. This one have a section of red on it, okay? So they kind of just like, it's like when you're trading snacks, which you guys do all the time. Jordan, I'm talking about you, trading Oreos. Paul, same with you. It's like they're just trading snacks for a little bit, right? So that's another important part of prophase 1 is crossing over. Prophase is pretty in-depth, but the rest of the phases of meiosis are pretty simple, okay? After prophase 1, we have metaphase 1, okay? So metaphase 1, I'm actually going to erase what I have right now because I don't like it. The way to remember metaphase is think M for middle. So if I have a nice big cell right here, right? What happens is those chromosomes that just did their crossing over madness, what they're going to do is they are going to meet up in the middle. Okay? And then I also have to make sure that they are drawn correctly. All right, and so they line up in the middle of the cell. And then those microtubule ropes I was talking about earlier, they start to attach themselves to the very center of the chromosomes. Just like this, all right? And I'm gonna draw a couple centrioles too. All right, so those are the microtubules again, and they just kind of lasso themselves onto the chromosomes just like that. And an important thing to note in metaphase is that these 2 right here are considered homologous. And same with the 2 down here. They are also considered homologous. okay? And that's because they look very similar to one another, okay? So I have a big chromosome right here, and then I also have a big chromosome right here. So even though they're not exactly identical, they have very similar structures, which makes them homologous. And same with these guys down here. All right, these are smaller, so they're going to pair up together, and then the bigger ones are going to pair up together like that, okay? And that brings us to anaphase 1, okay? So this is going to be anaphase 1. And what happens during anaphase 1 is those cells that we just had, or those chromosomes that we just had, they start to separate. So I can make this one a little bigger, but that's okay. All right, so I have my blue one and my red ones. Remember, they have that exchange genetic information through crossing over, like that. All right, and those microtubule ropes pull on the chromosomes to their side of the cell, okay? So unfortunately, they will not stay together. These chromosomes are going to go this way, and these chromosomes are going to go this way. So it's very sad, but they'll be okay by themselves, okay? So that's pretty much what happens during anaphase 1, is that the homologous chromosomes separate, kind of like what we said in the worksheet that we just did. Right here. Homologous chromosomes separate. All right? So now the last two parts of meiosis 1 is telophase 1 and then cytokinesis. So what happens during telophase 1 is the cell kind of looks like a dumbbell, kind of. Looks a lot like this. All right. So remember, I'm still going to have my chromosomes. I'm going to have that big red, oops, I didn't mean to do that. Big red one over here. Little red one over here. The big blue one over here. And a little blue one over here. Just like that. Make sure they have their proper arms. Okay, and what actually starts to happen is those microtubules that we just had, they're pretty much gone. All right, they just poof. They are out of here, all right? But what we do have is that the nucleus will kind of start to come back. All right, just like that, all right? It starts to come back just like that. All right, and the very last part of meiosis 1 is cytokinesis, okay? What happens during cytokinesis is we have the, oops, hang on. My board fell off a little bit, so I had a wonky circle. You know, you guys always make fun of my drawing, so I'm trying to do a good job. I have two cells, okay? One cell right here, one cell right here. Hey, this kind of looks like a smiley face. Sorry, not relevant. All right. This cell has that chromosome and that chromosome. This cell has this chromosome and that chromosome right there. Just like that. So pretty much all that happens during cytokinesis is the cell kind of just splits right down the middle, and then we have two cells, okay? But it's important to note right now that these cells still have 46 chromosomes. Okay, so they have 46 of those X's, all right? But we have to do one more phase of meiosis in order to make sure that the resulting cells have 23 chromosomes instead of 46, all right? So I'm just gonna write chromosomes right here, just so we're on the same page. Okay, so 46 chromosomes here, 46 chromosomes here. But eventually we're going to do one more phase of meiosis, which is going to split these two one more time, and then we're going to have the cells that we originally wanted, which were the cells with 23 chromosomes instead of that full 46. Okay, so that is going to do it for today on meiosis. So we're going to continue talking about meiosis 1 or meiosis 2, so that'll be tomorrow. And then I think on Thursday, I'm going to have you guys create some models with meiosis. So hopefully that will be a little bit more helpful and informative for you guys. So that's going to be it for today. I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day. And remember, tomorrow I'm going to be offering office hours from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. Hopefully Miss Stump and Miss Esborn will be there too, so you can ask any of us any questions that you want. All right, and I'm going to send the link to you guys today too, so be on the lookout for that. So hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Stay healthy, stay safe.